This is Sara Lomax. I'm President and CEO of WURD Radio, and I have the tremendous honor of interviewing Nikole Hannah-Jones tonight. She is going to be speaking at the University of Pennsylvania for one of their lectures, and um, I just want to say what an honor it is to meet you. I've seen you, I've heard you, I've read you, but this is the first time I've had an opportunity to interview you. So welcome to Philly, and thanks so much for this time.
Thank you. Thank you. I look forward to speaking with you.
Yeah. So tomorrow, your documentary, the 1619 documentary, comes out. Tell us a little bit about that transition from that powerful written article that was in the New York Times that started all this, the book, and now a documentary. So tell us how that feels.
Yes. It feels exciting. And after the original project published in August of 2019, we heard from several studios about wanting to turn the project into something for television or film, which of course I'm an old school print reporter, so I never even thought about doing anything visually with the project. But we signed a development deal with Lionsgate and Harpo, and sold the documentary series. It's a 6-part series. The first 2 episodes premiere tomorrow night, or tomorrow, I guess, at midnight on Hulu. And then there will be 2 new episodes each week for the next 3 weeks. And they're based on 6 of the episodes or 6 of the essays in the book. And even if you've read the magazine, read the book, listened to the podcast, this will still be a new experience. One, it's visual, but also we do all new original reporting in the documentary. So you'll meet Americans right now who are reflective of all the issues that we cover in the episode. So I'm excited.
That's incredible. And your career has been so diverse and dynamic. And the 1619 project really became a catalyst for so much vitriol and so much white hate and anger. And a lot of it was targeted very personally at you. And so you keep on coming.
Mm.
You keep on producing and creating. You're at Howard now. You are multi-talented, multifaceted. How do you manage the intensity of the hate?
Well, one, thank you for thinking I'm multi-talented. I appreciate
You
that.
absolutely are.
The beauty of spending really most of my life, and definitely the last 4 years, just studying nothing but the history of Black people in this country, is I know we are absolutely built for this, that there is really nothing that can be said that would make me stop doing my work or deter me. We come from a people who have had to fight and struggle against white anxiety, against white racism for 400 years. And what I know is that on my worst day, I don't know half, an iota of the suffering of our folks. So that resilience is easy. My work is easy. There's never been a day through all of this. And it's not to say there haven't been dark days. And not to say I've always handled it well. I don't think I have, but there was never a single day where I was like, oh, I don't know if I should do this. Because what you realize is all the attacks are to make you afraid to do your work or to make you disheartened from doing your work. And that's just not possible, because I know what we come from and I know who I do this work for.
So yesterday, Governor Ron DeSantis was honored in Philly.
I hear it was a little protest
There
over
was a
that,
protest. The Black community and the LGBTQ community came out in force to show their disapproval of that. But a big part of why so many people in the Black community despise him is because of his stance on critical race theory and teaching Black history in Florida. And so what would you say to the people of Philadelphia the Black people in particular in Philadelphia, about how we continue to keep the pressure on around this particular issue?
Absolutely. We also know Ron DeSantis just recently banned a new African American advanced placement course from being taught in Florida. So while he was claiming that the quote unquote Stop Woke Act was not about um, making it hard to learn Black history, his actions show that in fact it was. And I think the reason he and other governors, school board members, other legislatures have been able to so successfully target our history is the opposition is extremely organized. But those who are fighting for the right to learn and the right to be taught our history have not been as organized. So I was really happy to hear that there was a protest of the Union League's decision to honor a censor, right? A man who's using the power of the state to target marginalized groups and to erase the history of Black people from curricula. Because what it says is, even in a place that likes to think of itself as a liberal city, you have a lot of folks who are willing to work with people who we would consider to be antithetical to our beliefs as Black Americans and to our needs. So I think we just have to get much more organized. I actually don't think most Americans agree with Governor Ron DeSantis. I don't think most Americans agree with efforts to target the teaching of anti-racist texts and target the teaching of texts that deal with Black history, or texts that have queer protagonists and treat queer people like they are fully human as they are. But they are more organized. So we have to be equally organized and apply our pressure the same way that they've been able to successfully apply theirs.
When you wrote the 1619 project, when you organized that series of essays and the New York Times published it, did you have any idea that you were going to get the kind of backlash and it was going to really galvanize the right to fight so vigorously against it?
No, I mean, I didn't know what the project would do, period. I've been a journalist now for more than 20 years. I've always written about race and racial inequality. And as you know, um, there's a lot of great, amazing journalism that gets produced every day. And most of it doesn't have an impact. And it's not because it's not worthy work. You just don't know, in our society, with so much pulling on our attention, what anyone will pay attention to. And certainly tens of thousands of words on the legacy of slavery is not something you would necessarily think would become what it has become. So I just hoped it would resonate and have impact. And I knew that because it was being published in the New York Times, because we were making the arguments that we were making, that what if we considered 1619 and the advent of slavery our origin story, our origin, and not 1776 and these ideals of democracy and freedom? I knew that was evocative. I knew there was going to be a conservative outrage. To some degree, that's predictable, but certainly one could not expect that kind of the duration that it would become basically a political talking point, that everyone from the former president of the United States to sitting senators to state legislators would be targeting it. No, I couldn't have predicted any of that. But in some ways, um, if you mark your morals and values by those of your enemies, what type of enemies you have, then I think I have the best ones.
Well, you definitely have a variety, and they are very vocal and strong. I want to talk about your, so you are at the New York Times, you do this work, and then, and I don't know, I'm probably missing a few steps, but you were about to become a tenured professor at the University
Yeah.
of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and there was a whole brouhaha around that, and you ended up going to Howard, and you're the Knight Chair of Race and Journalism there. Can you talk a little bit about that process in your career and your decision making around that?
Sure. So I'm still a full-time journalist at the New York Times. I just have
Okay.
12 jobs. So I was the University of North Carolina is my alma mater. I got my graduate degree in journalism from there, and the dean at the time, Susan King, had been recruiting me for several years to apply for this Knight professorship. The Knight chairs are considered the most prestigious chair in journalism. They're designed to bring practitioners of journalism into the classroom, and they don't come open very often because once people get them, they tend not to leave them. They come with tenure. So she finally said, I have this open chair. I have to fill it. So it's like now or never. And so I finally decided, what an opportunity to have this chair and teach at my alma mater. I didn't want to let it pass me by. So I applied. I went through the whole tenure review process. I was unanimously approved for tenure by both the faculty of the journalism school and the university. But then when it went time for the board of trustees, to accept that recommendation, which normally is pro forma. There had never been another case where they didn't just take the recommendation of the faculty. I didn't get a vote, and it later was revealed that a wealthy donor, the donor whose name is on the journalism school, had interfered in my tenure process. He didn't want me to come to the university largely because of my work on the 1619 project. And so the board of trustees didn't vote on my tenure. And of course, it became a huge national scandal. Ultimately, the board was kind of politically forced to vote on my tenure, and they did approve my tenure in a split vote. But by then, I had already decided I wasn't going to go. I wanted them to vote because I deserved my vote, but that I was going to go to a HBCU, and ended up going to Howard. Myself and Ta-Nehisi Coates, who's a very good friend of mine, both announced we were going to Howard at the same time, and it was just important in that moment for me. I was going to be okay either way. I mean, I work at the New York Times. I didn't need this job in the academy, but to send a message for particularly women of color in the academy, whether the University of North Carolina hired me as a tenured professor or not, there'd only ever been one Black woman tenured professor in the School of Journalism in the entire existence of that school. The University of North Carolina, which is similar to Penn, which is similar to most of these prestigious universities, Black women are about 1% of all tenured faculty. So whether or not I got hired, there was a larger problem. And I just had to use that moment to shine a light on the struggles of so many Black women in the academy, and really so many Black women in the world, where we do everything that we're told to do to find success, right? We do all the things, we check off all the boxes, we get all the awards. And then at the end, when we achieve all those things, they just change the rules. So I wanted to show we don't have to get our validity from white institutions. We don't have to take the crumbs. We don't have to let them treat us poorly. And then we're so grateful that they finally let us in, that they treat us poorly, and we take the job anyway. I wanted to show that we don't have to do that, that we do have power to exercise
power move.
in that moment.
Power move.
Right. And that we can go build our own. We can, and as you know, right, it's okay. And it's something that we should actually aspire to. If you want to achieve in those white institutions, by all means, you should. But we shouldn't think that this is what we have to do to be successful. And so it was important for me to go to Howard, to bring so far 20 million and counting to the university to help Howard journalism students and journalism students across the Black diaspora, but mostly just to send a message both to these institutions that they should stop treating us like we're lucky to be there, when in fact they're lucky to have us, and to also say it's okay to come home, that at some point we can come home.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. My radio station, WURD, which we're broadcasting on, is celebrating 20 years. It's our 20th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so I want you're working at Howard, you're working with students, young Black students. What's your sense of the future of Black media and Black journalism, or journalism for Black people?
I think the future is strong, though it's going to be in different forms than what we're used to.
Sure.
So I teach on Mondays at Howard. It's my favorite day of the week because I'm in that classroom with those kids, and I'm like, y'all are so brilliant. You're so much more confident than I was at that age. And I know it's because they're being groomed in a Black institution, an institution of Black excellence. And that just gives them, they're there because they want to be, because they chose to be at an institution like this, and they understand the weight of that legacy and want to do right by that legacy. And that's so inspiring. And I feel like we are in a period of democratization of media. You don't have the same handful of gatekeepers who can gatekeep Black stories. You don't have to have a big building and a printing press now, right, to be able to get your word out. So I think it's strong. What I want to see more of, and what I am most concerned though of, is we have a lot of people who are writing opinions.
Mhm.
Um, we need to have more Black media that is producing substantial news, investigative news, news that really shows the way power is being wielded against our communities. And that's more expensive, right? I think so many of the Black journalists who would be working at Black institutions, they can't afford to. So we have to figure out a model that allows us to attract the best Black talent, that allows us to pay people what they deserve. You shouldn't have to make a financial sacrifice to work for Black media. And we have to be doing substantial news. It's okay to do other type of news. It's okay to do opinion news. But what's most important and impactful in our communities is real substantial reporting. So I'm working on some things on that too. I think that I don't want to say I think there are enough Black folks with money that we can actually fund some of these things. We just have to get our priorities straight.
Okay. So I wanted to ask about back to the 1619 project. Um, I recently, like just a couple of days ago, I got back from Brazil. And while I was there was a group of Black Brazilian journalists who hosted a dinner for me. And it was an incredible opportunity to listen and understand their challenges. And so much of what they're struggling with it mirrors what we're struggling with here. And so, white supremacy is a global phenomenon. And so I want to know, like, as you continue to build the reach of your work, do you have plans for extending this work into the African diaspora? And how have Black folks in other parts of the world received your work so far?
Yeah, thanks so much for asking that. I've actually been to Brazil twice, talking about the 1619 project. The last time being right before, it was literally the week they shut down New York City schools because of the pandemic. So I probably shouldn't have been over there. So I agree, particularly with Brazil. I have a particular interest there because our histories really are so parallel. Even, at Brazilian independence, the conversations and the arguments about whether they were going to become a new nation that allowed slavery or didn't, just like our nation. So what's been so great, there's a group of journalists there who actually produced their own 1619 project inspired podcast, and it's had tens of millions of downloads. It's called Project Carreno, and it's named after the man who's considered the father of Black Brazilian history. And I've gone on that podcast. I've read. I don't speak Portuguese, but I've read the English translations of it. And so this project is inspiring other communities to try to do kind of similar introspection. I don't think that should be my work. I'm not an expert in those areas, and I do believe strongly in people being able to tell their own stories. But if I can be an inspiration, if I can help provide guidance to communities that want to do a similar exploration, what was so amazing about that Project Carreno is, as you know, Brazil has a similar history, but they are a lot further behind in the conversations about race than we are in America. And they have a Black population that hasn't, even though it's it would be considered a majority, at least in America, they count who's Black differently over there, but who is becoming more and more assertive of their identity and their history in a way that we've been doing for a while now. So that podcast kind of really took Brazil by storm because people had never experienced a telling of their history of Brazil in that way. And so I'm really inspired by that. I was in Amsterdam speaking about 1619. The White Lion actually was flying under the Dutch flag. And the ships were built in Amsterdam. So Amsterdam wasn't a major player in terms of transporting Africans, but they built the ships that transported Africans. And so I was right there where that first ship left, and used that opportunity to call on the governor, or the Netherlands, to pay reparations for their role in the transatlantic slave trade. I just attended a big diasporic reparations convention in Ghana, the first of its kind, where people from all over the diaspora were coming together to work on our collective reparations. So I do believe in diasporic work. I do believe in speaking wherever anyone is willing to talk about this legacy that so many countries have worked to cover up, and am happy to support other projects, including would really love to see a similar project about Indigenous people in the United States as well.
Mm. And so I want to ask you about who inspires you, whether it's an ancestral or somebody contemporarily. But I know that you started the Ida B. Wells Society, and so I'm assuming Ida B. Wells is definitely an inspiration. But if you want to talk a little bit about the start of Ida B. Wells Society, and like what is and who is your inspiration?
Yes, absolutely. So my Twitter handle is Ida Bay Wells for a reason. I call Ida Bay. Now I'm gonna call her Ida Bay Wells.
Ida Bay.
I call Ida B. Wells my spiritual godmother, and I forced myself into her family. I'm now like with Michelle Duster and Dan Duster. I'm an honorary family member, whether they want to claim me or not. And Ida B. Wells was the first version of a Black woman that I ever saw who was doing what I had done, what I hoped to do. I didn't grow up. I grew up in a very working class community in a small town in Iowa. And I never knew a Black journalist, and I certainly didn't know a Black woman investigative journalist. And then I find the autobiography, and I read this, and I cannot believe that a woman of any race existed and lived that life in that period, right? Because she was the original intersectionalist. She was a feminist, a suffragist, a civil rights activist, and an innovator of investigative reporting techniques. And in fact, the NAACP, which she helped found, even though she largely got written out of that kind of collective history, took on the issue of lynching because she forced them to. And she, with the Red Record, was kind of the first person to start cataloging the number of Black people who were being lynched and the actual true reasons why they were being lynched. So she's such a model and inspiration. And also she was just, I don't know if I can cuss on the radio, but she was a badass. So bleep that.
You can say badass.
Okay, I'm not gonna say nothing too atrocious, but she really was, right? She's less than 5 feet tall. She dated all these, she had a lot of boyfriends. She lived on her own. She was determined. I mean, she canceled her own wedding because she had work to do, and was determined to find a man who was as feminist as she was. She hyphenated her name. When she got married, she wasn't willing to give up her name, so she became Ida B. Wells Barnett. She would take her child out on the road with her after she had her children, and report. And like, I'm a career woman, I still have to work. So she's just such a model. So absolutely. And she was fearless. She did not take, I probably can't say that word, she didn't take any mess. And it sometimes got her in trouble. So I just keep that in mind when I sometimes get myself in trouble. And then, I've spent a lot of time in the last 4 years really thinking about my direct ancestor, Arlena Tillman, who was born on a cotton plantation in Greenwood, Mississippi, who was born into a sharecropping family, who only got a 4th grade education, and then joined that flood of Black migrants out of the South. She, with my father, when my father was 2 and his older brother on the Illinois Central Railroad, determined to change the fate of her family. And she lived a life that a Black woman from the South with a 4th grade education could live. But her making those steps allowed me to become the person that I would become. And I often, and this is especially in those dark moments, think about, this was a woman who had every dream, ambition, hope that any other human being would have, but she was born into a society where she could realize really almost none of them. But her refusal to give up, her one act of resistance, which was to leave that plantation in the South, set up my entire life and allows me to do the work that I do. So I take inspiration from that every day. Like anytime I might want to start feeling a little bit sad for myself, I'm like, girl, please, your life is not hard. You come from folks who lived a hard life, and yours isn't.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I know that we have to wrap this up, but I just wanted to ask one thing. What's next? I know tomorrow's the
Are you
big
an editor?
launch.
What? Let me just have this moment. What's next?
Can I please just bask in the sun for a minute?
Let the documentary come out.
What's next?
I don't even know, honestly. for 4 years straight, I've worked on nothing but 1619 project.
Mm.
I've spent 2 years working on this documentary series that comes out tomorrow. And I'm actually at a place where I'm like, for a long time, I actually don't. It's been a long time since I don't actually know what's next, and I'm just thinking about it. I'll let you know as soon as I know, and my
Well,
editors.
and you deserve to take a deep bow, take a deep exhale, and because what you have contributed to the world is phenomenal.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much. And I know we got to wrap things up. Thank you. And we've been talking with Nikole Hannah-Jones. And thank you.
Thank you.